In terms of the discourse today, I'm going to be talking about fear. Fear, as we all know, is an extremely powerful emotion. It is something that every single one of us has experienced in one form, in one shape or another. Fear is so powerful that it can cause panic. It can alter the way you think. It can change how you react. It can make you do things that you wouldn't customarily do if not exposed to the stressors of fear. And one important point to make about fear is that the veil which separates us from perceiving the true reality, from perceiving our true selves, is composed in large part by fear. A lot of people, mystics, talk about fear as being really the fuel of Maya, glamour, and illusion. It's basically the gasoline which is poured on the fire. And the more gasoline you have poured on the fire, or stated another way, the more fear that you have, the thicker is this veil separating us from the true reality. So if we want to pierce this veil, we have to do away with fear. Fear is so powerful that, as we know, a lot of despots, they use fear to control their countries, the population, through fear of punishment, fear of reprisal, fear of repercussions. They control how people think. They control the press. They really control, um, in very minute detail, different aspects of the running of their country. And it's all through this fear. So, how do we overcome fear? In order to um, discuss that particular topic and give us tools that we can use, practical tools, I chose one fear, specifically the fear of failure. And as we talk about this fear of failure, a lot of the things that comprise this particular fear comprise other fears. And the tools that we'll be discussing to overcome this particular fear, you can use to overcome pretty much any fear. So, the fear of failure. What causes the fear of failure? Like many different fears, the fear of failure um, is the result in large part of attachment. So this would be attachment to outcome. So for example, we have a particular project at work and we do the project to the best of our ability. But what most people do is they don't end there. Once they're finished with the project, they then have um, a certain expectation about the outcome. And if the outcome is not something which they deem to be a success or a victory, it then becomes a failure. And so this attachment to outcome breeds this fear of failure. Fear of failure is also tied into attachment to the past. So because of things that have happened to us in the past, if the outcome of those past events is not, in our particular opinion, favorable, and we deem them to be a failure, the worry is that in the future that same thing is going to happen. So we have this attachment to the past, which is drawing into the future, making concrete in the future this fear that we are going to have another failure, another poor outcome. And of course, there is attachment to the future, causes this fear of failure. We're so worried about the particular outcome, so nervous about what might happen. Um, and remember, fear is a magnet. So if we're worried about the future and are worried about the outcome, we're actually making concrete in the present our worries about the future. All of these different attachments, attachment to outcome, attachment to the past, attachment to the future, attachment to what people think. What happens with these different attachments is that they construct a path for ourselves, a false path. Or viewed differently, they construct a false narrative for ourselves. So that if we veer from this false path or this false narrative, we deem ourselves to be a failure. So in order to overcome attachment, there's many different steps that we can take. Step number one, to overcome attachment, you must live in the present. In fact, the Buddhists say that the only true way to live is to live in the present. If you are living in the past or living in the future, you're actually not living. Tied into this is attention. As we teach here at the Spirit of Lotus, what you pay attention to is what you energize, and what you energize is what really becomes a reality for you in the here and now. So if you're paying attention to the past, your perceived past failures, past worries, past fears, what you're doing is energizing those fears, those failures, and turning them into reality in the present. As we always say here at the Spirit of Lotus, we are co-creators with God. We are the director of the play, and what you pay attention to creates your reality. And the same is true as if you're paying attention to the future in terms of worrying about things which have not happened yet. There's a mystic which says that worry about the future is one of the most useless things that you can possibly do in terms of your energy. The future has not happened. And again, if you worry about it, what are you going to draw into the future? Fear not lest it come upon you, right? So if you're worried about things in the future, whether it's financial worries, family worries, job worries, relationship worries, whatever it is, those things haven't happened yet, but since you're worried about them, all of that fear energy, all of that attention creates this huge magnet and draws all of those things into your life. And what do a lot of people do when what they fear ends up happening? They say, oh, I knew that was going to happen. I expected that to happen. And they don't fully realize that they're the ones who created it in their lifetime. So, again, stay in the present to overcome attachment, to help you overcome fear. Number two thing that you can do is to, and this is something that Thich Nhat Hanh teaches, who's a Vietnamese Buddhist monk, who some of you may know. He says what a lot of people do with fear is they push it away. They hold it at arm's length. They treat it as something that should be despised, that something that's bad. Um, so what he says people really should do instead of that with fear, whatever the fear is to embrace it, to treat the fear with loving kindness and compassion. For it is only through embracing your fear, through loving kindness and compassion, that you can understand the fear and the basis for the fear. And it is only then that you will be able to transmute the fear. So instead of pushing fear away, keep it close to you and treat it with loving kindness and compassion. And this ties into the third way to overcome fear. And the third thing you have to do is, like I just said, you're never going to overcome a fear if you don't face it. Because if you don't face your fear, you're never going to understand the basis of the fear. So, taking, for example, fear of failure. Is the basis for the fear or the cause of the fear because you are attached to success and happiness? In other words, do you believe that your own happiness can only result if a particular project that you've done in terms of its outcome is successful? And if the outcome is not successful, are you therefore going to be unhappy? Again, with respect to fear of failure, are you attached to what other people think about you? So depending on the outcome of a particular project, are you worried that people aren't going to like you? They're not going to think you're smart enough. They're not going to think you're dedicated enough. Um, they're not going to think you're capable enough if the outcome is unsuccessful. Or vice versa, if the outcome is successful, are you tied into people's approval of you, talking about how smart you are, how capable you are, how dedicated you are, and you base that kind of praise on your own happiness? So the point is, whatever the fear is, and I used fear of failure as an example, but whatever the fear is that you're dealing with, you have to face it head on, look at it directly, determine what is causing the fear, and then you can take steps to transmute it and overcome it. A fourth step is, with respect to fear, is to look at fear not as something which is negative, not something which is potentially harmful to you, but something which is positive. And let me try to clarify that a little bit, again, using our example of fear of failure. A lot of people associate failure with being bad, right? So if the outcome wasn't good, then it was a waste of your time. a waste of effort, and no good has come out of it. A different way to look at that, though, is a fear of failure is an opportunity for growth. Whatever happened that led to the particular outcome, you can use as a tool to change things for the better in the future. And this opportunity for growth helps you evolve, helps you transform. The bottom line is nobody goes through this lifetime without failures. Now, that is an impossibility. We are all faced with failure as an obstacle which we need to overcome. And how you approach that obstacle in terms of, oh my gosh, this is something so awful, versus, wow, this is a real opportunity for me to be a better person, to bring myself into step with what will achieve enlightenment during this lifetime. That dictates really how our lifetime goes, and in terms of happiness versus unhappiness. Another one of the steps that we can take to overcome fear is to recognize that nobody, and I mean nobody, overcomes fear without putting in the time and the effort to overcome it. You can't just wake up one day, let's say you have this great fear of failure. You can't just wake up one day and say, you know what, today I'm not going to be afraid of failure, and then you push the fear in the back of your mind where it sits and festers and grows and gets stronger and stronger, and you conduct your day basically ignoring the fear without taking any steps to overcome it. So it takes time and it takes effort. So to overcome fear, you must put in the time and the effort, and that includes doing your practices. One great way to overcome any fear is to gain a greater understanding of who and what you really are. If we truly realized, if we truly believed, if we truly had faith that we were God, that we were co-creators, it would be impossible for us to fear. Do you see that and understand that? So one of our goals in overcoming fear should be to have a greater realization of who and what we are. And in order to do that, you have to do your meditative exercises, your contemplative exercises, your chanting, your breathing, all of these different tools which help us become more in tune with ourselves, more in tune with God, to quiet the mind, to quiet our emotions. And in doing that, this will dissipate fear, any type of fear. So those are the steps that I wanted to share today in overcoming fear. And once we overcome fear, by the way, you don't have to be perfectly enlightened to overcome fear. This is something which really all of us can achieve by putting into practice the different tools that we've shared today. Overcoming fear is certainly going to be a benefit as you go up the mountain towards enlightenment. But the point I'm trying to make is you don't have to be at the top of the mountain for you to have overcome fear. This is something that we can all achieve as we are going up the mountain. Once you're at the top of the mountain, you're in perfect unity with God. Um, Frankly, you probably wouldn't be here any longer in this physical body unless you chose to do so. You would have fulfilled your divine plan and your divine purpose. But once you overcome fear, I can assure you that you will achieve peace of mind, peace of the emotions, uh, tranquility, bliss, and really true happiness. Because at that point, you will have pierced the veil of Maya, glamour, and illusion. So thank you very much for your time. And we do have about 15 minutes for a deep level meditation.